Welcome to the Open Apple podcast, where we celebrate the Apple II. Whether you're a long-time user, a nostalgic visitor, or a newcomer to the community, join us as we share news and memories of Steve Wozniak's most famous personal computer.
Hello and welcome to Open Apple. This is episode 62 for August 2016. I am your co-host, the first, Quinn Donkey, and with me as always is co-host the second, Mike McGinnis. How you doing, Mike?
Hey, we're back live from MP3 or something.
Yeah, it's been a while. We took last month off to run the Mega Podcast, which is always a joy for those of us recording it, and poor Mike, who then doesn't have to edit a podcast.
Yeah, I sort of got off easy, I guess, although not going to KansasFest and being able to participate myself was kind of a bummer, but I did get to hang out with Mike Will Eagle. That was fun.
Cool. How did that come about?
Well, apparently he has family out here and I guess he didn't make the connection that, hey, I was out here too until this time when he came out to visit. So he emailed me and came over and showed me his all the everything that I've ever wanted to know about Apple I blueprints. I now know, plus then some.
Awesome.
Yeah, it was pretty cool though. We had a good time.
Cool. Well, for any of our newer listeners, you want to explain who Mike Will Eagle is?
Yeah, Mike Will Eagle's the guy that does the Apple I replica project. He did a small run of Apple II boards that were also replicas. And I think he's the brain behind the Brain board, which is that plug-in card for your Apple II that allows you to swap the ROMs out with whatever you'd like, including turning your Apple II into an Apple I.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, while you were off doing that, I was, of course, at KansasFest, where you were much missed. Hopefully next year.
But thank you.
And there's lots to talk about from KansasFest, and I'm sure we will delve into lots of that during this episode.
Indeed.
And in the coming couple of episodes, because, of course, I won't be able to shut up about it. But one of the folks who is now a regular attendee of KansasFest and made quite a splash this year is Mark Pilgrim. Say hello, Mark.
Hello, Mark.
That joke never gets old. So, welcome to the show. This was, how many Kansas Fests have you been to now?
This is my third in a row.
Third in a row. Cool. So we're actually on the same schedule. That was also my third in a row. So you're probably best known in the Apple II community for doing a lot of software preservation these days. And you made quite a splash this year with the announcement of Passport. So can you talk to us about what Passport is?
Sure. Passport is a automated verification and preservation tool. It can verify and copy a lot of copy-protected disks that would otherwise be tedious to crack by hand. And as I showed in my presentation, it's now down to one keystroke if it's the type of copy protection that Passport supports and knows how to strip. It will strip it all automatically.
Wow.
So, okay, so it cracks the disk and then also spits out a disk that is no longer protected. Is that correct?
Correct.
Cool. So, yeah, for preservationists, this is a pretty amazing thing because it means you can get the full copy of the game, not what some teenage boy in 1986 thought should be the complete copy of it, and also with no obnoxious crack screens or anything like that on the front of it. So that's pretty amazing. How long have you been working on that?
About 6 months. I think I started in about January of this year. So
now, is this the way Passport works? Is it like, say, a locksmith or something where it's like an RWTS and then a library of parameters that you feed into it, or is something else going on behind the scenes there?
No, not really. Passport is different from basically all the bit copy programs from back in the day because they all were designed to make a bit perfect copy with the protection intact. And so best case, you ended up with a physical floppy that would still pass its copy protection checks, either structural or at runtime or both. Passport works differently. It just has a certain amount of knowledge built in. There's zero parameters whatsoever. It either works or it doesn't. And when it works, what you end up with is a completely unprotected copy that you could easily, image with ADT Pro, or it could actually be a disk image already that's on a floppy EMU or a CFFA 3000, one of these modern mass storage and floppy emulator devices that you can hook up to real hardware. The demo that I showed at KansasFest, I actually have a CFFA 3000 in my Apple IIe, and I created, in front of the audience, created a new DSK image, mounted it in slot 5, disk 1, and then cracked a previously unpreserved disk that was in slot 6 on a real floppy, and then booted slot 5 to show that it actually had worked.
That's very impressive. Wow.
Yeah, it was quite a demo. We'll link to that talk in the show notes. Luckily, the talks this year from K-Fest were all archived on video, so we'll be sharing a link to that one. I think Mark's was probably almost everybody's favorite. It was extremely entertaining, culminating with this live automatic crack of a piece of software on stage. So really great. So Mark, how many pieces of software have you tested Passport on? Like, have you found stuff for how many things will it crack, and is there anything it won't crack, and so on?
I'm glad you asked. I mentioned this briefly in the talk, but I have a collection of about 3,000 E to D images, which are alleged best case. They preserve everything on the disk, all the bits, and so you can run that in an emulator. And it's a digital bit copy, like Locksmith would make on a physical drive. So the point is that I can automatedly test this verification and auto cracking tool that I wrote by writing a script that mounts these EDD images in a supporting emulator and then runs them in the virtual Apple II emulated environment and then logs the results. So I did that, and I forget the exact percentages, but it was able to auto crack about 2/3 of the copy protected images that I had. Of course, the images that I have are skewed towards educational. There's a lot of mech in there, and they reused the same, very similar copy protection for many years. There's a lot of, Sunburst and developmental learning materials and focus media and a Spinnaker and designware. Passport does not do very well with the, AAA games type, Prince of Persia, Karateka, anything from Broderbund generally. But it does well with educational software where the original developers basically outsourced the copy protection, like it was put on at the disk duplication house as a service, and we're now removing it in bulk.
As a service.
As a service, right. So it depends on, when you say, just when you ask, like, how successful is it? It's extremely successful at the things it knows about, and occasionally successful on things that I haven't tested, and fails very quickly on everything else.
Yeah, what was part of what I think is really interesting in this is, for those of us who don't know much about, the copy protection industry of back then, is sort of learning how there were these patterns, as you say, that a lot of companies just outsourced their copy protection. And so once you've detected it, then you can crack a lot of different things. Because I think what's possibly unique about Passport, in case people aren't sort of grokking what it's doing, is that it's not trying to copy the bits on the disk in the way that, Copy2 Plus and Locksmith and so on had various increasingly clever ways to try and read data from the disk that was sort of at a higher level than the copy protection existed at, you've gone the other way. Like you're actually like looking at the code in the bootloaders and sort of like you say in your talk at KansasFest, using the disks against themselves and using them to load their own code and so on. So it's detecting what the actual copy protection algorithm is and then defeating it, which I think is really, really interesting.
Yes, that's exactly right. And there were cracking tools back in the day, various demuffin tools. I forget exactly why they're called demuffining. It's an interesting historical story, tangent. But there were, super demuffin and advanced demuffin, and these required that you would go capture the disk's own disk reading routines out of the bootloader and then feed them into one of these demuffin, advanced demuffin programs, and it would spit out a copy of the disk that didn't work yet but all the data was in a standard format. So the disk was copyable, and then you had to go patch up the disk reading routines usually so that it would be able to read itself now that it was in a standard format, and you would need to go defeat any secondary runtime protections now that you'd used this demuffin tool to normalize all the structural protections. And Passport automates all of that, all steps of that, capturing the disk reading routines, doing the actual demuffining, and then doing the post-demuffin patching, finding secondary protections and fixing up the RWTS routines and all of that.
So, and for anyone who might be less technical in our audience, RWTS is read-write track sector. Is that correct? And that's kind of a general little block of code that people write to read from the disk. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. The really interesting thing, just looking at it from a modern perspective, the really interesting thing about Apple II floppy disks, especially from the 5 1/4 floppy disk era, is that every disk is an island. There was a standard format in the sense of DOS 3.3 and this DOS system master disk, and you could initialize your own data disks. But that was just a convention, like it wasn't a requirement. Every single disk that you ever booted on an Apple II had to sort of bootstrap itself from the ground up. And so because there were no disk reading routines in ROM except just enough to get you started in this process. So every single disk, the first thing it has to do is load the routines that are on the disk itself that can read the rest of the disk, which is just completely insane if you think about that from a modern perspective. You put in a CD and into your CD player, and okay, I'm dating myself here, but still, you put in a CD and the first thing your CD player has to do is run a program so that it can read the audio. That's insane. I mean, no one no one would design a system that way on purpose.
I think that's hard for people nowadays to grasp, is that, if you were going to build a storage medium, of course you would have some sort of standard format and then include in the computer or whatever the code necessary to read and write that standard format. And the Apple II just didn't do that. Everything, as you say, everything was just made up as they went along.
Right. And other 8-bit computers that were contemporaneous with the Apple II did have more standardized format, smarter hardware, smarter floppy reading hardware that, presented this, abstraction layer. Hey, give me this sector, and the drive would be like, okay, here it is. And that was it. That was how you interacted with the disk. So of course, publishers loved taking advantage of this because it provided something that they wanted, which was uncopyable disks. Because every Apple II, as I said, it came with, the DOS 3.3 System Master, which had a copy program on it, which could copy unprotected disks. So if you want people to not do that, you have to be able to defeat at least that copy program, copy A. And then they got more and more involved after that. It was a whole cat and mouse game for about 10 years.
Yeah, I think a couple of good companions to your talk this year would be Paul Hagstrom's talk on EDD, the Essential Disk Duplicator hardware, which helps preserve disks as well. And also, I think, Mark, you gave a talk, was it last year or the year before, on the E7 bitstream? And that included
that was last year.
Yeah, and that included sort of a summary of the industry of copy protection and, the sort of cat and mouse history of it on the Apple II. So we'll link to those in the show notes as well, because they're also both great watches.
Going back for a minute, how far back actually do you go with the Apple II? Mark, when was your first Apple II experience?
My first experience was, I'm trying to remember exactly, I think I was 11, so that would be 1983. And my father, who was a college professor at the time, bought an Apple II so that he could write a thesis on his sabbatical. And he got an Apple II as opposed to any other kind because that's what they had in our elementary school. I mean, granted, they had like 2 of them total, but apples were for education and everybody knew that. And so that was important to him. And so that's what he got as opposed to anything else. And he did actually write a thesis. And the first thing I said is, well, what can it do? And he said, it can do anything you want it to. And I was hooked.
So did you just dive right into cracking software even back then?
No. All of that is quite modern. I admired the people who were doing that because I just couldn't even wrap my brain around it. And I had no access to, original software beyond the couple of programs that my parents had bought. And I didn't spend a lot of time in the word processor until, high school and whatnot. But I did for that first year. I think they got it in September. And by November, I was asking for programming books for Christmas.
And how long did you stick with the Apple II before you moved on to something else?
All through high school and into college. So I used the Apple II. I think we upgraded to an 80-column card at some point. I begged for a second disk drive and got it at some point. I begged for a real joystick. They had gotten me a koala pad because they wanted me to draw on it. Of course. Try playing Wavy Navy on a koala pad.
Well, actually, now I kind of want to.
No, you don't. Anyway, but I stuck with it for several years. They eventually bought an Apple II GS to replace the Apple IIe, and I took that off to college. And at college, I was exposed to Macintosh computers for the first time. And at some point, I think in my second year, I started programming at the computer lab and asked for my own Mac for Christmas. And so yeah, that's probably about 8 years when I was pure Apple II all day, every day.
And then how did you find your way back to the Garden of Eden, so to speak?
I think it was in about 2010 that the family friend that my parents had sold our original Apple II back in the late 80s when we upgraded to the 2GS, she sold it back to me. She hadn't used it in about 10 years, 15 years. But she used it for, quite a while doing, mail merge and AppleWorks, advanced AppleWorks stuff, and then moved on herself. But she still had it in a closet, and she mailed the whole thing to me, mailed, a box of printer paper, which is like the least useful thing to do with the postal service, I think. Anyway, but I'm like, yeah, give me it all. She's like, okay, here you go. Charge me for shipping. And so I got my old Apple II back, and I just, by then, of course, the internet was around, and there was this community of people who were insane and still using it or reusing it, and I could buy modern hardware for it, I think the first thing I bought was a micro drive from what was then called Ultimate Micro. No, Reactive Micro, and has now been merged into Ultimate Micro. That gave me a mass storage device for the first time ever, and that was really a game changer for me. That was really what got me back into, like, this is a thing. Like, I don't have to be swapping floppies all the time anymore, like some kind of 20th century peasant. I can just turn the computer on and, get a menu because it's, there's like a hard drive, and I knew a little bit about ProDOS. I learned a lot about ProDOS in 2010 and 2011, like that it existed. And I learned about CiderPress, and I learned about, all these modern tools for dealing with disk images, and I found Asimov, and I found all these other people, and within a year I'd found, the Facebook group, enthusiast group, and the news groups that were still kicking, and several other, forums. And, meanwhile, my wife is thinking I'm completely nuts. But happy, but oddly happy. So it's hard to argue with that at the end of the day. And, I didn't spend all that much money on it, but it was certainly, it was this big physical thing that was suddenly in what used to be our shared office and quickly became my office. And, so I sort of slowly took over like this physical space, which was, I don't know what she was expecting in 2010, but that wasn't it.
Well, that's sort of the trick these days, isn't it? Because, you can actually get a fairly decent 2E on, I don't know, eBay or something for, less than $50 if you do a little comparative shopping. So these days, it's not really even about the dollar amount. It's about the footprint on your desk that this thing is taking up, and slowly crowding everything else out of your office is kind of a metaphor, I think, for how the Apple II takes over our lives.
That completely mirrors my experience from 2010 to 2012, when we moved to a new house, a bigger house. And by then it was clear that I needed, if not an entire room, certainly half of a room with like a dedicated desk, which I am currently staring at.
Awesome.
Which has an Apple II and 2E and an Apple II GS and two small LCD monitors. Thank you, Quinn, for turning me on to the Night Owl LCD monitor. And, a box of floppy disks over there in the corner. And over on the other side is two probably dead, certainly beyond my capability to fix right now, 5 1/4-inch floppy drives, including the one that I used at KansasFest, which has since died in the 2 weeks since I got home, because I'm very hard on floppy disks.
Well, as Jason
drives.
Scott says, they're on their way out anyway. So
yeah, we're doing the best we can, trying to get stuff off of physical floppies.
So all of that so far sounds like a fairly, standard story for a lot of Apple II users who had it and then kind of went away from it for a while and found their way back. But what I'm not hearing in here is there was no copy protection piracy thing way back then. So what got you into it in 2010 or whenever you picked it up?
Actually, I picked it up in just about 2.5 years ago, in early 2014. And it was always something that I had wanted. Like, as I said, I admired the people who did it, not necessarily their typographical skills or their sense of aesthetics, but certainly the technical chops were there. And I just didn't know. I just didn't know how to do that. And it had always fascinated me. And I had a couple of original discs that I had gotten on eBay, either as part of some other lot or that I, particular games that I just loved, and for some reason I wanted an original of it. And so I just had about half a dozen original discs lying around, and I think out of 6, 5 were copy protected, because of course they were. And I just set out to do it. I had a lot. Anyone now has a lot more resources at our disposal. I wasn't plugged into any sort of pirate BBSs or anything back in the day. I think I had like one, like the Disc Jockey's Cracking Disc from 1983 or something that had all these text files on it. That was just endlessly fascinating to me, but way beyond my capability to understand anything when I was, an early teen. But, in the interim, I've grown up and I look back on my early forays into deep protection, and it's just embarrassing how little I knew, and how little I knew that I knew, and how much I thought I knew that I didn't know. And that's probably still true in the sense of, I wasn't there back in the day. I wasn't either on the pirate side or the producer side. I still don't know a whole lot about the industry of copy protection. What I do know, I've basically reverse engineered from the bits up, not through any sort of normal means like talking to people.
Yeah, that was a highlight of your E7 Bitstream talk for me last year, was it how you sort of reverse engineered what the industry of copy protection looked like based on who was using these particular algorithms.
Yes. And you really can trace, it really was, we call it a cat and mouse game, but it really was, oh, hey, somebody invented something new. Let's all go jump on it, either release our new stuff with it or re-release our old stuff with it, or both. And everybody was using, the latest thing, and then it got broken. And by broken, I mean not that crackers broke it, but that, it was integrated into the next version of Locksmith or Copy 2 Plus or Nibbles Away or whatever, EDD. And then, the cycle started over. And that was a matter of months, really. But that just happened over and over and over again. And, looking back on it 30 years later, you can see exactly when particular development houses, big houses like Scholastic, which outsourced basically all their copy protection. They were like one of the ones that would just jump on the latest protection. So you look at like a long running series like Microzine, which ran for like 6 or 8 years. And, they started out with purely structural protection that put stuff in little spiral half tracks. And then they moved to something else and moved to the E7 Bitstream at one point, and then moved on. And then eventually by the end of the 90s, they had just made a company-wide decision to abandon copy protection altogether. That's like a microcosm of the entire industry right there.
Now, it seems to me that between you and maybe some other individuals out there who are also doing some Apple II cracking, that there's a lot of, I was surprised first just in general at how many titles there are out there that are still, have never been successfully or completely cracked. But a huge percentage of that seems to be the educational market. Am I right on that?
Yeah, that's been my experience just looking at it, from my vantage point, is that pirates back in the day were very focused on arcade type games and big name adventure games and basically nothing else. And there were some, by the end of the 80s, there were some automated tools that would deprotect things like mech or copy, specific titles, but in the educational market. But generally, you were stuck with whatever the bit copiers could use. But of course, that doesn't get you any closer to, the digital now. That just gets you a copy-protected physical, just gets you 2 copy-protected physical floppies instead of 1.
Right.
Which doesn't get you any closer to, being able to do the amazing things that Jason Scott has pioneered on the archive of, running emulators in pure JavaScript and running these old programs, running an entire computer in a browser. So, yeah, back to your question, the edgeware market was vastly underserved by pirates because nobody wanted to put up a BBS with like 7 lines or whatever and a $2,000 1 MB hard drive or whatever the heck they were, and offer Spanish irregular verbs in the future tense. I mean, nobody did that, and so 30 years later, we have very few of these. We have, as I said, we have a bunch of mech stuff because there were some automated tools, and the copy protection is very light. But even there, I've been finding in the last couple of years, and Antoine Vignau and Brian Weiser and Bill Martins, who are doing the mech.co, we're all finding homemade copies of mech titles that we didn't even know existed. Like the only record, like we don't have it in a product catalog. We don't have a poster about it. We don't have any sort of box for it. The only thing we have is somebody's handmade floppy with their 1980s handwriting that says "Smoking, it's up to you."
Wow.
Literally, that's it. And this is, as far as I can tell, this is the world's last remaining copy of this mech title. So, like, that's how far behind we are. And if you look at, like, preserving all the software from that era, that's how far behind we are. We don't even know the things we're missing.
Well, and that's sort of the power of Passport, right? Is that because it does particularly well on those educational titles and the stuff where they outsourced it, the copy protection, and to be able to automate that should be really, really powerful. So you must be Jason Scott's favorite new person.
Well, I think I was Jason Scott's favorite old person, or I'd like to think so. I mean, we're friends outside of the Apple II community, and I'm always happy to see him at KansasFest and go to Steak and Shake with him and so on. But yes, to the question of preservation, this lowers the barrier to entry. And one of the things in the show notes is linking to a guy named Jeremy in, I think, New Zealand or Australia, who I've been in contact with, who went through his own personal collection and was able to preserve with the help of Passport, preserve several titles that I'd never even heard of, that no one had ever cracked before, that just, it just would have been rotten away on physical media for another 10 years until it finally went into a landfill. We would never have a copy of it. And he made a copy of it, and now it's up on the Internet Archive.
That's really great that you were able to achieve that with Passport.
That was very heartwarming, yes.
Some of these descriptions I read that are posted of some of the more recent cracks that have been floating around these things seem like a Gordian knot where, it's just this impossible knot that you can't untangle, and the more you pull on it, the tighter it gets. And is there anything out there that you haven't been able to crack yet?
Oh, sure. I have a whole drawer of things I can't crack yet. But it's a completely different set than it was a year ago. And that may not be literally true, but it's probably about 80% true. But yes, there are a lot of one-off protections or things that are just different enough that, realistically, there won't ever be an automated way to strip off the copy protection and run them. Which is not to say it can't be done, but just that it needs to be done by hand. It needs to be done one at a time. And what Passport allows is, the people who have the skills to do that, to focus on things like that. And that's not just me. There's a lot of people who are a lot more skilled at it than I am, who are still active in removing copy protection from these types of discs. And, so they get to work on the really hard stuff. And the stuff that used to be like sort of intermediate level, beginner to intermediate level, but was the same from disk to disk to disk, can now be completely automated by someone who doesn't essentially have any skills at all. They have an Apple II and they have an original disk.
Very cool. Yeah, it's the best kind of tool. So yeah, the moral of the story is everyone should download Passport and start going through their own personal floppy collections, because you never know what you might have in your collection that nobody else knows about or has preserved yet. So that's pretty exciting. So how did you then find your way to KansasFest for the first time?
I don't remember exactly. I think it was the Facebook enthusiast group that where I learned that there was like this weird conference. Might also have been Jason Scott, where I learned that there was this weird 5-day conference where people just hung out and talked about Apple II stuff. And I think it was Jason Scott that told me, yeah, like this is worth going to. Like this, I mean, there's actually some other stuff, vintage VCF and a few other like related conferences, but he's like, yeah, KansasFest is something special. You should make the time. And I made the Faustian bargain with my wife. I mean, just promising her everything under the sun to be able to go, sight unseen, to driving 2 days. Thank God I found a carpool buddy, another guy who lives like half an hour from me, and we drove for 2 days with a trunk full of like vintage computing equipment and just completely ridiculous tableau of anyway. So, and my wife was very skeptical and was just convinced that that this was all a scam, or that these people were, it was a cult, or y'all were like,
well,
secretly serial. I know, right? Secretly serial killers, or just, I don't know. That has not been my experience, by the way. Everyone should come to KansasFest. But
we may be a cult, but we're not killers.
Not yet.
Yeah, I find very little killing happens. Yeah, and it's been dropping every year, so that's a good trend.
And it's usually off campus that we do all that.
It's all officially nothing related to KansasFest.
You're going to go edit that out, right?
Sure.
Anyway, and I came back and I'm like, honey, this is my tribe. This is it. Like I didn't even know I had a tribe, but this is it. This is my tribe. And she's like, oh God, you want to go again, don't you? I'm like, I am so going again. And I have every year, and now she's just, I've worn her down. Marriage is an ongoing negotiation, and it's awesome, and we've never been in a better place, but I'm not sure KansasFest really helped with that.
Excellent. And forgive me, I'm still chuckling at the thought of a little old lady mailing you a giant box of blank paper. But was it fun to have your own Apple II back? And is that the one that you brought to KansasFest?
Yes, it is. Although, as you probably know from your own experience, there's a bit of Ship of Theseus thing going on, where I've slowly replaced, parts either as they've gone bad, like the power supply, or like the monitor. I replaced the big CRT monitor with a nice small LCD monitor, and floppy drives, of course, come and go. Although I do have my original floppy drives, they don't work for reasons that are beyond my capabilities to fix. I had to replace the keyboard this year because I'd spilled grape soda on it about 3 months ago, and I got a wonderful, beautiful, nice keyboard at the garage giveaway. That was the only piece of hardware that I was really, really hoping to get. I had been using a borrowed keyboard from my carpool buddy for several months, and he wanted it back.
Yeah, that's I think you win the award for most literary reference on this show so far. But yeah, it's true. At some point, is it still the same computer anymore? Hard to say.
It is still the same. It is still the same computer case and motherboard. Although my parents never bought the enhancement kit. I found that out the hard way in 2010 when I tried to boot ProDOS 2, and it was like, nope. I'm like, what the heck? What is an enhanced 2E? So I found that out the hard way. Anyway, it's all good now. But yes, this is, in some fashion or another, I am still using the Apple II that my parents bought in 1983. And that's just awesome.
So you mentioned you've gone through a couple of floppy drives. You were imaging for much of your time at KansasFest. How many floppy drives did you burn through in that process?
5. But most of them were 3.5 inch, and most of them are still usable. I didn't have anything with me to clean the heads, and I have a head cleaning disc and the little cleaner solution, and I didn't bring it because I'm an idiot. But you can edit that part out too. And I didn't really want to take them. I didn't want to take them apart and clean them by hand because I did that once 2 years ago under Tony Diaz's tutelage, and I'm just never doing that again. It's very difficult. Anyway, but yeah, I set up my Apple II in the common room in the corner, and John Brooks, who was there for his first KansasFest, set up his 2GS rig, and I got him set up with the appropriate array of programs for imaging protected and unprotected disks, and we burned through about 800 floppy disks and then put them all back on the pool table for the giveaway throughout the week. Most of those are now up on the Internet Archive or Asimov or both. I still have about 100 to go through. They're just auto-numbered, unlabeled. I just need to boot them in an emulator and see what the heck they are, and then label them and anyway. But yeah, but we did well. We preserved a lot of things that would otherwise just go into a trash heap or go into somebody's collection and never be seen again. And a lot of it was educational stuff. There was a whole series of things on chemistry and physics and astronomy. Obviously, some science teacher got rid of his collection and it ended up in the giveaway this year. But it was stuff I'd never seen before and that nobody had ever heard of, and that had probably no commercial value even at the time. It probably didn't even. It was probably locally produced, maybe with some educational grant from the government, or maybe not, and just a whole series of things. Really great stuff, some of it. And even the bad stuff is, who am I to judge? What the future is going to find important. So we imaged everything we could and then handed off the physical media to somebody else who actually wanted it. I don't want it. I have a lot of floppy disks and a wife. Did I mention I have a wife?
Yes, a very understanding one, as I hear.
Very, very understanding. I love you, honey. But I still have about 1,800 floppy disks in my office.
Ooh.
And that doesn't take up a whole lot of room because the boxes are somewhere else, but it takes up enough room that you'd notice.
It's a lot of shoe boxes.
Yes, it is. So what's next for Mark Pilgrim?
Oh, I don't know. Sleeping, napping, Pokemon hunting. Literally right after this, we're done recording this. I promised my kids I'd go Pokemon hunting with them. They're all into the Pokemon Go. Little do they know that I installed an Apple II emulator on my phone, so I can be happy while they're out, staring at their devices.
My God, it's become a family activity.
So are you going to keep...
They're just too young, just barely too young to go wandering around by themselves. And anyway, they don't want to wander around in our neighborhood because it's boring. They want to go to the Pokestop, 2 miles down the road. Anyway, this is not a Pokemon podcast, but
it could
anyway,
be.
So that's what I'm doing later tonight.
These days, every podcast is a Pokemon podcast, I'm afraid.
I know, right?
It's everywhere. So, are you going to keep cracking stuff and keep expanding Passport? What's next in your Apple II life?
Probably keep expanding Passport. There are several. I have several things that I had sort of pushed to, post KansasFest release, just to get a stable release, and that worked out well. But there are certainly some things on my list. Obvious expansion opportunities that would allow it to crack, a whole new range worth of discs, a whole new, category of protection, and I haven't really hit the 80-20 point yet. So there's still a bunch of low-hanging fruit that I just haven't had a chance in 6 months to add. And after that, who knows? Maybe that'll take 100% of my time. Maybe by then I'll be burned out. Maybe I'll go back to cracking them one at a time.
Cool. Well, that's we'll definitely be here to report on that, whichever way it goes. All right. Well, speaking of reporting, yeah, we've got a lot of news to cover since we've been gone for a couple of months. So why don't we dive on into that?
It may be old, but there's still news. Apple II news.
So why don't we start with this first item? I'm going to jump out of order here a little bit in our notes since we've been talking about Passport. This fellow has a nice blog post on how he's using it to preserve his discs, and it's a good read. How did you find this one, Mike?
This is the Jeremy Barhide write-up. Is that the one you're talking about?
Yeah,
I think this is the same Jeremy that Mark mentioned earlier. Is that correct, Mark?
Yes.
And I was actually doing a little research on Mark and his work at KansasFest, and this popped up as one of the top search hits, and I'm glad that it did because there's a lot of really great information, not only on Passport, but putting it to use in a real-world situation.
Yeah, very cool stuff.
And he's using, it looks like the floppy EMU, which we talk about a whole lot on the show, so extra points there.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of it myself. All right, so speaking of archiving, this is a cool one. The complete archives of Genie and Delphi are now online again. I was flipping through this a little earlier today, and it's really fun. I was never on either of these services, but I was on some of the news groups and stuff back in the day, and it's fun to sort of see these old conversations from the 90s and earlier. People solving a lot of the same problems that we solve today, but without the benefit of some of our modern tools. So that's a really good read.
Yeah. So the newsletters, the monthly or weekly newsletters that were put out were called the LAMP. There was Genie LAMP and Genie A2 Pro LAMP, and later I think there was a Delphi version of it, and I think they were done variously by I think his name is Lyle Syverson and Ryan Sunaga and a couple of other people, which sort of gave you a little condensed version of all the good stuff. But the actual archives hadn't been online for quite some time now, and they're not only are they back, but thanks to the hard work of David Finnegan, they're all indexed and searchable. And I was enjoying reading through some of the message threads that had less to do about Apple II and more about users complaining about Delphi's prices increase and what they were going to do with the new hour structure and stuff like that. It's definitely a real window in time.
That's right. Yeah, before everyone was sure what the internet was going to be, and these companies were all trying to figure out how to make money doing what they're doing.
But clearly after the heyday of the Apple II.
Yeah, definitely. Mark, were you ever on any of these online services?
I was not. My first internet experience was the actual internet in college.
Yeah, that was mine too. I looked at a lot of these services, and it just seemed like the internet seemed imminent at that point, and I just sort of felt like these services were sort of a waste of time. I wasn't sure what the advantage was, but they were certainly popular amongst Apple II users in many cases.
All right. Quinn's too good for that.
Well, like a lot of people, I had access to the real internet by then, so I was spoiled, I guess.
Resist.
Yeah. Well, and at home, actually, I clung to BBSs for a really long time. Because a lot of these services were American, and they didn't always have Canadian local dial-up numbers. So most of them I didn't have access to anyway. So it was a case of BBSs and then straight to the internet when it became available in university. So. All right. Well, moving right along, as we alluded to earlier in the show, the dates for KansasFest 2017 have been announced. The KansasFest committee has been aggressive lately about announcing next year's show during the current one. So that's really exciting. It makes it easy for people to plan. And in 2017, it will be July 18th through the 23rd, and again at Rockhurst University. So mark your calendars.
Already done.
Yeah, I'll definitely be there. Mark will be there. Mike, hopefully maybe 2017 will be your return.
Maybe that'll be the lucky year.
We're all pulling for you. All right, next up. So one of the interesting things about this year's KansasFest is that there was a reporter roving around. And much like there was last year, in fact, there was a Vice reporter for Motherboard, or however that works. I don't know. One of them is the blog and one of them is the column or something. I don't know. The internet is hard. But this year there was another reporter wandering around, a fellow by the name of David Pierini, and he had his camera and his reporter notepad, and he wrote a series of articles on Cult of Mac for all about KansasFest. They're all really fun read. I think he really does a great job of capturing the feel of the event and lots of the characters that make it what it is. So we'll link to A2 Central actually did a really nice summary of all these articles, so we will link to that. And from there, you can read all about it.
Yeah, I think if you had to pick one, though, my recommendation would definitely be the interview with Martin.
Mm-hmm, for sure. I like the one about Javier as well, actually.
One of the articles, I'm not sure which one, but one of the articles has a picture of my feet.
Good to know.
Your 15 minutes of fame.
I'm famous.
Yes.
Foot famous.
No, like I was at my station in the common area, and I had this, box of random hardware, including dead drives and so on, perfectly normal thing to have at KansasFest, but from an outside eye, it probably looked very interesting, and I was just resting my feet inside because that's again a perfectly normal thing to do. And I saw him like pointing the camera. I'm like, "Do you want me to move my feet?" He's like, "No, actually, I want the feet in the shot. That's the perfect shot. That's what I'm going for." So my feet are famous.
Excellent.
That's all I have on that.
All right. Well, at the same time as KansasFest every year, it's now a tradition that WOZFest also takes place, which is that's WOZ with a capital O-Z, as in Australia. It's a play on words, in case anyone didn't get that. So it's a very similar sort of event that takes place in Australia every year, and this is the fourth one. And for anyone who's not following along, they're tracking these WOZFests in hexadecimal. So this is WOZFest $4. I'm really looking forward to the 10th one. I feel like that's when this joke is really going to hit its stride, and I think it'll be worth the wait. But in any case, we've got a nice recap of that event if you weren't able to attend. And every year we attempt a Skype link-up with WOZFest, and it occurs at some hideous hour of the night or morning or something because of the time difference. But I've never actually made it to that, so I'm not sure how well that goes. Mark, were you there for that this year?
No.
Okay, so we'll assume that worked well and everybody had a good time.
Well, then it would be a change from when I used to go.
Yeah.
Because that never went well.
Yeah, I suspect technical difficulties probably got the better of that. But nevertheless, if you are in Australia and unlike friend of the show, Michael Mulhern, you can't make the extremely long trek to all the way from Australia to KansasFest, you can go to WOZFest instead. And similarly, there's one in France as well every year, Apple II Festival France. It doesn't quite overlap with K-Fest. It's coming up soon in August. Actually, by the time this show goes out, you may have missed it. So I hope you all had fun and you somehow knew about it besides this show. But it's the 12th and 16th of August. And, plan for it next year if you missed it this year. It's about the same time every year.
Wow, so it's almost as long as KansasFest now.
Yeah, it's expanding. Just before the show, I was listening to the Cult of Mac podcast, where they also reference KansasFest this year. In fact, we can try to link to that in the show notes if I can dig that up. And they mentioned that, of all the Apple products, the Apple II is the only one that has an annual festival dedicated to it. Well, in fact, there are 3 annual festivals at least dedicated to it every year that are all multiple days in length. So take that, all other Apple products. And speaking of festivals and conferences and things, VCF West is happening right now. So again, that doesn't help anyone listening to the show, but this is a big deal because VCF West was gone for basically forever, and it was a really strange thing that the birthplace of computers somehow didn't have a VCF. So it's good to see them doing it on the West Coast once again.
Yeah, they started out just as they were the original VCF, and I think it was like 98, 99 for 2 years. I went to the second year. I know I didn't make the first one, and then it just hasn't happened since then. So really awesome to see it back again. I think all of these are 2-day events, usually like Saturday and Sunday, but they have some usually really great speakers, and it looks like there's an Apple I showing up at this year's, which seems to be a common thing these days. But yeah, lots of great stuff to see there, especially if you want to get away from all Apple all the time. I don't know why you would, but you'll see a lot more than just Apple there.
Very nice. Mark, have you ever been to any of these other shows besides KansasFest?
Did I mention I have a wife?
Yeah, we'll take that as a no. Yeah, and why would you really?
I get one. Every year. I get one. I choose KansasFest. No, I've never been.
Well, you've chosen quality over quantity. I respect that. All right. Well, we've talked a lot about new software development that comes about from KansasFest and related activities. And we've got a new game that has surfaced through various sources. I found it on A2 Central. And Mike, you've got a link here to a Google group to conversation about it. It's called Space 4048. And it's a game written in low res. And there's a video sort of trailer for it, sample gameplay that we'll link to. And I got to say, this thing is a lot of fun. It's I believe it's one of these projects where, much like a lot of us have been doing, where they kind of are getting back to the stuff that they wanted to do when they were younger and didn't have the resources or the knowledge or whatever to do it. Writing a video game in assembly is one of those things. So Space 4048 is this fellow's project along those lines. And I have to say, for low res, it's really quite charming. It looks very playable. It reminds me of Demon Attack with a little bit of Galaxian in there. Have you watched the video for this, Mike?
I have, yeah. That's a great way to put it. It looks like it's designed to run on any 48K Apple II, hence the low res. Yeah,
very nice. And he says in one of the comments, I think the comment on the video says it works best if you watch it at a small size or kind of squint your eyes a little bit, which I think is good advice because, it does look good. But if you stare at it too closely, the low res will start to hurt your brain a little bit. It looks really great. All right, so the folks at Call APPLE or Call Apple have been busy. They have a couple of new books announced. Talk to us about this one, Mike.
Yeah, so this is Bill Martins and Brian Weiser, who we mentioned earlier in the show, and they've, as has become their habit at KansasFest time, they've released a couple of new books. I know that they had previously announced there is a collection of all of Mike Harvey's editorial columns from the years at Nibble Magazine, all collected into one nice volume. They made that available, I think, a little bit beforehand so that you could pre-order it and get it signed at KansasFest. But they also showed up with printed versions of the Apple II Monitor Peeled, which is a great tech manual that I highly recommend, and an enhanced version of What's Where in the Apple. This book has goes back many years, and there were a bunch of different versions that popped up back then. And a couple of years back, Bob Tripp decided to revisit the original and went through and came up with a nice e-version and a PDF that had all the bugs fixed, and there were some typos and things like that. And they have since gone through it again. This time, I think it was mostly Bill and Brian's effort, but they now have the advanced or the enhanced version, which includes, I think every version of every Apple II that Apple ever even thought about. So. And I think these are, they look like they're doing self-printing through Lulu. So you're looking at $50 for the soft cover and $70 for the hardcover for What's Where, $20 for the soft cover of Apple II Monitor Peeled, and $30 for the hardcover.
Very cool. Yeah, as someone who has also recently gotten back into Apple II programming, I can attest that the What's Where in the Apple II book is excellent. There's really nothing quite like it. I mean, there's a lot of information in that book that is not anywhere else. So when I was doing a lot of reverse engineering of AppleSoft for my callback system and WeGUI and stuff, I went to What's Where a lot. And as far as I know, those books aren't available online anywhere. So if you want them, Call APPLE is the place to go. All right, so next up, we got a little bit of Marina IP news. So for anyone who isn't familiar, Marina is the TCP IP stack for 8-bit Apple IIs, which still hurts my brain a little bit that that's even possible. And it's a very, very cool piece of programming. And so he's got an update for, let's see, what's he updated here, Mike? Help me out.
So this is the June 2016 update. Looks like maybe just some minor bug fixes. not seeing a whole lot of new here, but I think the most important part of the announcement probably is that moving forward, he's not going to be working on this really anymore unless there are any show-stopping bugs or anything like that. But it seems fairly complete. I like that. I sort of like and sort of don't that he, in the Google Groups announcement, basically said it's the most useful thing that nobody's using or something like that.
Yeah.
For an IP stack that doesn't do anything, it's now more capable than ever. So there's this nice framework out there for anyone who wants to play with it. Looks like David, who's he is one of our younger friends of the show, is discovering that as life moves on, time gets kind of short, and suddenly you end up doing other things. So if this is the final version, then, thank you for what you've done, David. This is really awesome, and we hope somebody picks up the gauntlet and continues to develop. Yeah,
well, and honestly, I'm not sure anyone even needs to. The nice thing about developing for 30-year-old hardware is that it's static. So, once someone gets something working, it's done. That job is done. So we will have TCP/IP now for 8-bit Apple IIs forever. I mean, there might be some edge case somewhere if I put the card in slot 5, it doesn't work or something. But for the most part, once these things are done, they're done. They don't need constant updates like modern software does. And that's, he makes the point in this post that the Ethernet 2, he was originally developing with the Ethernet in mind, but the Ethernet 2 does the TCP/IP stack in hardware on the card. So it kind of renders Marina somewhat unnecessary. And it's, the Ethernet 2 is a much better way to do it because, with the 6502 at 1 megahertz trying to manage the TCP/IP stack, it's hard to imagine there'd be much horsepower left to do anything else with that TCP/IP data. So this may end up not being as necessary as the Ethernet 2 catches on, but very cool. And he goes on to describe a couple of new projects that he's got in the pipeline. He's excited to get started on. So thank you for that work for sure on Marina IP. Well, speaking of Apple II projects, I guess Mike, we talked up beforehand about not letting me do the segues. This is why. Speaking of Apple II stuff, I guess.
Segue break.
Combo breaker. Okay, I'm terrible at this. You get what you pay for in co-hosts. Yes. Speaking of stuff, there's all right. So this is actually a news item I really love. Over on Comsys Apple II, someone has put together a list of every Apple II project on GitHub, and there are
Mr. Finnegan.
Oh, okay. There you go. Thanks for that fact. There are way more of these projects than I ever would have imagined, in fact. And this research is quite thorough because I went to look at this link. I'm like, I should add my own projects. And he found them all. So, including an unannounced project that I have not told a single soul about because I started working on it during this year's KansasFest. So impressively thorough, this list, I have to say. Somehow he managed to find just about everything. On that subject, if you find my unfinished project, you'll know because it appears to have no documentation and the source code is garbage and that doesn't work. Rest assured I'm still working on that and hopefully can talk about it next year at KansasFest. But if you want to see all the really amazing stuff that everyone else is doing on the Apple II, this GitHub directory is your one-stop shop.
Wait, Quinn, so you're saying that you put something on GitHub that has no documentation and terrible source code?
Yes, I know. Shocking, right?
What? That never happens.
Yeah, so in other words, it's just like everything else on GitHub. Is that? Yeah, we're going for that. Lol. Okay, moving right along. The inventor of logo, I'm afraid, has departed the Apple II community forever. This is Seymour, I'm going to say Papert. It's probably French, so Papert, perhaps. Mike, how did you find this one?
How did I find it? I don't remember. But if you go to MIT News, the article is there, and you can read about it. He was a professor emeritus at MIT. He died at 88 years old. His the central tenet to his theory of learning is that people build knowledge most effectively when they are actively engaged in constructing things in the world. So it would make sense that he would come up with something like logo. Anyway, the article is well written and fairly in depth, and does talk about the history of Logo and how he developed that and where it came from and where he had hoped it would go.
Yeah, the philosophy of education in question is called constructivism, and it's actually kind of in vogue again with modern things like Minecraft and Mindstorms, Lego, and such things. So it's kind of in vogue again, which I'm glad to see, because I don't know anything about education, but I sure do like building stuff. So I'm glad that they're doing that in schools.
Seymour, however, is no longer in vogue.
Too soon. But yeah, if you want to know more about Logo, I would recommend going to the KansasFest video archives, where
Lukazi?
Actually, no, I was going for Peter Neubauer there. Yeah, Peter Neubauer is a big fan of Logo and one of the KansasFest committee members, and he's done a bunch of sessions on Logo at KansasFest, and I've really enjoyed all of them. I think you'd be hard-pressed to find an Apple II owner who doesn't have a fond memory of Logo. My personal favorite was a later version called Logo Writer that actually had kind of a sprite system in it, and you could make little movies and little games and stuff. So we did a lot of that back in school when we were supposed to be doing other things. Mark, did you ever use Logo?
Oh, yes. I have wonderful memories of Terrapin Logo in particular, from a summer computer camp that I went to one year, and I don't remember which version it was, probably version 2. But yes, I still have some Logo programs that I wrote from back in the day that I've since transferred to disk images. Awesome.
Yeah, Peter Neubauer has kind of rekindled some of my interest in it, and I might just start writing some stuff in it for fun. It's actually still in use on modern machines. There are actually modern implementations of it. So it's not just for drawing spirograph images. It's actually quite a full-fledged, elegant programming language.
Still called Terrapin.
Oh, how about that?
And they will still sue you for putting their stuff up.
Okay, noted. So we won't be running Passport on that.
I scanned a bunch of their Apple II Terrapin Logo manuals and stuff, and immediately got a takedown letter from them.
Goodness. Okay. Friendly folks over there at Terrapin Logo. So what you would not do in Logo, however, is write a vast new RPG for the Apple II. Huh? How about that segue? Yeah.
Nice.
You liked it.
Nice.
So the Lawless Legends team gave their annual update at KansasFest. And, it was good. We saw a couple new features, and they showed off the new font engine, and it was all fine. And then, of course, Martin Hay did his signature one more thing. And
mic drop.
Yes, the mic drop this year was that while we're all waiting for Lawless Legends, they went ahead and released another entire new game at KansasFest. And it's called Ancient Legends. It's based on the Lawless Legends engine. And not only did they release it and release all the source code on GitHub, which we will link to in the show notes, they released the source code on GitHub live during Martin's presentation. And the rest of us should just go home because we can't make KansasFest presentations this good. But they had a trivia puzzle or a game where they gave away 5 copies of Ancient Legends on floppy disks with like professional made labels and everything. Very nice looking. And actually they're copy protected as well, which I found amusing. And they gave these 5 copies away to some lucky folks. I think the very first copy went to Carrington, who the question was, what was the name of the tree or something? There was something about the name of a tree. And Carrington immediately went to the GitHub link that was in Martin's slides and just started searching the code for the word tree and found it within a couple of minutes. So I think the intent was you were supposed to play the game and then find this tree. But Carrington cheated and or used the Kirk maneuver or something, however you want to look at it.
Change the parameters of the test.
Yes, there you go. Yes, the what do they call that? Help me out here, nerds. The Star Trek Kirk thing.
Kobayashi Maru.
Thank you. Okay, I knew one of you two would know that.
I did, but I didn't want to admit what a nerd I was. So.
Seriously?
We co-host an Apple II podcast, Mike. I think that ship has sailed.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
And to answer your inevitable question, no, Passport cannot automatically crack the copy-protected floppies. But I did image them, and I will add support for it, even if it's the only one-off I have to do.
It's personal now, right?
Martin created a new copy protection scheme in 2016.
Really?
Well, I don't know if it's probably not terribly difficult, but it's not one of the classic ones.
Okay.
So now I have to crack it. The cat and mouse game is back.
Yeah, it was just on hiatus for a little while. All right, moving right along. Speaking of things no longer being on hiatus, yes, another good one. Halt and Catch Fire is back. That's right. Everybody's love-hate relationship, I guess, with network television has been rekindled, and season 3 is coming back August 23rd, which is probably before this show is going to air. So suffice to say, you should go back and watch episode 1, I guess. I probably won't be watching this one for a while at least, because I cut my cable this year, which I'm very, very happy about. But Mike, are you going to be watching?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm looking forward to this. It was a little bit scary there for a while because they had announced, like right after the season ended, that it was going to be renewed, but the ratings were down, and then there was like nothing. And they kept announcing dates for all the other shows and nothing for this one, and it started to feel like, well, maybe they're going to cancel it after all. And then a week or two ago, they announced that they finally told us what the date would be. So yay for us.
Yeah, sometimes the gaps between seasons I think they're getting longer as these, modern shows get more and more complex and expensive to make. I find the seasons are getting shorter and the gaps between are getting longer. I think Netflix has taken that to new heights. Season 2 of Marco Polo was 2.5 years or something after season 1.
Wow.
Which I think might be a record. But anyway, that has nothing to do with Apple IIs. Mark, are you watching *Halt and Catch Fire*?
No. Never even heard of it.
Oh, okay. Well, it's
unlike you nerds.
Oh, that's fair. I feel like that's an accurate characterization. All right. Well, we've talked enough about *Halt and Catch Fire* on this show, so we don't need to re-summarize it. TV show, blah blah, retro computers, yay. Okay. Next up, we've got an interview on Gizmodo of some early hackers in a group called the Inner Circle. And this is a pretty interesting story, not entirely Apple II specific or related, but it is a good read anyway. Mike, talk to us a little bit about this one.
Yeah, so these days, the tell-all behind-the-scenes histories of computer companies and hacking groups and things are all over the place, and they're a dime a dozen. But back in '85, there weren't that many books like this. There was one that came out called Out of the Inner Circle, and it was written by a boy named Bill Landreth. And the story of what happened to Bill afterwards is actually almost as interesting as what he tells in the book. And at some point, I guess someone over at Gizmodo decided to follow up and find Bill and see what had happened to him. And they managed to get in touch with Bill and one other hacker from the infamous Inner Circle hacking group, and sat down and had quite an in-depth interview with him. It's very, very good read, and I highly recommend it. And you can get cheap copies of Out of the Inner Circle on Amazon right now.
Oh, very cool. Yeah, that article is a good read. It's a long read, so if you got some time, I recommend it. It's the TLDR is actually that Bill Landreth is now actually homeless in Santa Monica. So he's had quite a crazy trip through life, but he's working on a screenplay, it sounds like, and he's got other big plans. So certainly sounds like an interesting character, that guy. Good read. All right, well, back to hardware for a minute. A2 Heaven, everyone's favorite Mad Bulgarian, is crazy going at it again. So now we've got some new products. We've got Passport MIDI card clone, not to be confused with the Passport software product of recent mention. And he's got a new battery backed up 2GS RAM card, actually a couple of those. And has he got a new Apple II VGA card, Mike? What's that about?
No, I think I just noticed that they were back in stock. They had been out of stock for a while. So okay,
so that's the Apple IIc one?
Well, the 2C NTSC is out of stock. There's another one simply labeled Apple IIc VGA that is available right now.
Okay. And is he also selling? He's been working on the VGA add-on for the RamWorks board. Is that available yet? Do you know?
I'm seeing. So he's got the RAM Factor 8M and the RamWorks 8M. I don't think those are the add-ons. Those are the battery backed up standalone cards.
Right. Yeah.
There's another one called the Piggyback 8M, 8 meg, and that is in fact the RamWorks 3 add-on. And so that's available right now for $79.99 US.
Excellent. Yeah, he's been teasing that one on the Apple II Enthusiasts Facebook group for a while, so great to see it in the store.
And as with all this stuff, they tend to be made in short runs, so get them now if you want them.
Yeah, if you blink, they're gone, so definitely buy them while you can. And he's not alone in creating crazy new cards. Ian Kim in Korea, who we've talked off and on about quite a bit lately, has also been busy. He has made his own version of the Passport MIDI card, and he's also cloned the Turbo 7 CPM card for the 2GS. So it's always a little bit hard to tell with his blog what's available and how you actually buy it, but it looks like the MIDI card is still in production. He's showing a prototype of it, but the Turbo 7 card is now available for sale. If you want to run CPM on your 2GS, that appears to be possible. I wasn't able to find an actual link to click to buy it. Do you know how to do that, Mike? Is he selling them on eBay or?
It's a little bit frustrating because some of the website is in I assume that's, I don't know what language that is.
Korean, I think.
I'm Korean, and some of it's in English, and so the translator just goes nuts if you try to feed it through that way. I don't see anything. I don't see it for sale. There is a category bar off to the left here, but I click on the sale button and nothing happens. So I'm not sure.
We'll dig around a bit and see if we can find it. I think he's been selling some stuff on eBay, so there might be one of those links. Might be a link to his eBay storefront. We'll try and find that. I think because he's got a blog. His site is sort of half blog and half storefront, and it's not clear exactly how to buy things sometimes. But we'll try and track that down. But it does exist. There are photos of it. So if you want to run CPM on your 2GS, it is definitely possible.
And if you're looking for what it's compatible with, it is a Microsoft soft card clone.
Very cool. All right, and just the hardware just keeps coming. The more news on the Manila Gear 4Sonic 4-channel sound card. It's ready to ship. Is that the news here?
Yeah, it's. I saw this over on Call Apple actually. He's decided that it looks like it's time to start shipping the 4Sonic 4-channel sound card that they had announced back in July.
Very, very cool. And actually, Antoine Vigneault teased on Facebook, or maybe it was Twitter the other day, that he bought 2 of these, and he's got 8 speakers getting set up. So he's doing something over there. I'm smelling a new demo maybe in the pipeline. There might be a demo that only 2 people on Earth can actually get full enjoyment out of if it requires 2 4Sonic 4-channel sound cards and 8 speakers. But I love that exists. Mark, have you got any of these fancy modern cards in your Apple II?
I do have the A2 Heaven RAM what is it? The 8 megabyte RamWorks.
Or the RAM Fast?
The RamWorks. And I do have the VGA add-on, but I'm not currently using it.
All right. Well, moving right along, KansasFest regular Javier Fiera. I'm sorry if I'm butchering your last name, Javier. He's better known as the Retrobyte Guru, and he also started the Apple II FAQ, which is sort of a way to consolidate all of the information that is out there about the Apple II. In particular, I think it was built in response to the 700th time someone asked on the Apple II Enthusiasts Facebook group, how do I plug a VGA monitor into my 2GS? The answer is you can't, but you can sort of, and it's complicated, and we're all tired of answering that question, I think. But he has looks
Quinn
like he's open.
Is.
Yes, I think I answered it 4 or 5 times, and then I just gave up.
I am sensing some lingering resentment in your voice.
Yeah. Yeah, the urge to gatekeep is sometimes strong in these communities, but it's great that we constantly have new people coming into the Apple II Enthusiast Facebook group. But Facebook is so terrible at finding information on that people don't realize that these questions have been asked and answered. But that's part of what Javier is hoping to solve here with Apple II FAQ. Hopefully,
and sometimes Quinn's just general low grade hostility towards me eventually spills out towards some of the listeners sometimes. So.
Yeah, well, I find hostility is its own reward. It's kind of an end unto itself, really.
Yes.
So Javier has opened a storefront at Apple II FAQ, and he's selling Apple II shirts and coffee mugs. So who doesn't want more of those, right?
Cool.
At KansasFest this year, we saw some really great T-shirts. Someone had a T-shirt of the Red Book cover, which I really, really loved. And of course,
that's awesome.
Yeah, of course, Mark, you've got that one of the E7 Bitstream. And you were wearing one with a gumball screenshot on it, which I love.
Yes. Also, a special shout out to Kate Skotnicki, who came to KansasFest for the first time and was wearing 8-bit Mario and Donkey Kong dresses that she sewed herself.
Yes, and actually she won the annual tie contest with a floppy disk themed dress that she made. So that was just fantastic. So she crushed it. She was a big hit at the show. So hopefully she'll be back next year. We had a lot of first-timers this year. It was great to see everybody. New faces. Let's see. Well, we were talking about Antoine Vigneault. He's been busy. French Touch has released a new demo that plays music on a Mockingboard while loading from a 5.25-inch disc. And this was a common stunt in 2GS demos, but to do this on an 8-bit is pretty fantastic, I have to say. Have you watched this one, Mike?
It's stunning. It's just it really astonishing. Is. Like, I just can't believe that that's an actual 1 megahertz Apple II loading high-res images from a 5.25-inch floppy drive, playing this wild music at the same time with no skips or stutters or interruptions or any sort of anything. It's stunning.
Yeah, it really is. It's one of those things where the more you know about the Apple II and how it works, the more impressive this feat is. It's a real technical tour de force to be able to do this. So the French Touch continues to show us all how it's done. All right, well, speaking of the elite of our programmers, Jesse Blue of Ninja Force has updated Kaboom to version 1.03, so it now supports the 4-play joystick card. There was rumors, I think, last month that was going to happen, so it finally has, which is excellent. Kaboom being a Bomberman clone, it's perhaps best experienced with 4 people, so it's great that there will be a way to do that. And in fact, we previewed this at KansasFest this year. We had a Kaboom tournament with 4 people and 4 joysticks, and fun was had by all.
Woo!
While that was going on, a second group of us were playing the aforementioned Lode Runner board game. We talked about that a couple months ago. It showed up on eBay, and I was bemoaning the fact that I just missed that auction. I was willing to drop the $150 buy it now on it. Well, it turns out the rascals at the Retro Computing Roundtable, in fact, got together and bought that. They were the ones that won that auction. And
jerks.
Yeah, they donated it to the KansasFest committee, however. So the Lode Runner board game will now show up every year at KansasFest from now on for everyone to play. And it was just wonderful to see it.
Oh, God.
It's terrible, to be fair. If you're a board gamer, as I am, if you're used to Carcassonne and Tigris and Euphrates, this thing is awful. But I love that it exists, and it has a charm about it. And if you're an Apple II and Lode Runner fan, as all of us are, we had a great time playing it. We really did. So it's surprisingly true to the feel of the video game. They definitely tried to capture that. So now the race is on to see who's going to make the first Lode Runner board game video game. That joke was made, so now someone has to actually do it. All right, moving right along. Mike, is the Apple II Info Wiki no more? What's going on here?
Yeah, that looks like it's offline. Now, there was a message over on, I believe it was the Google Groups, talking about how it had gone from the the sign that says it's under maintenance and it'll be back soon to now it's just a GoDaddy Park page. So that's unfortunate to see. However, it still does exist in some form up on the archive. So if you're looking for information from that wiki, the wiki itself is gone, but you can find it on the archive.
Good stuff. Yeah, that's one of those sites that I don't think people necessarily appreciated, but it always came up in your Google searches for how do I plug a VGA monitor into my 2GS or whatever.
Well, it was also great because in addition to those sort of questions that you could get answered, it also had a large collection of photos of a peripheral card and what it was and the specs and all that. So if you're looking at something and didn't know, you could go to that site and compare and, this is who made this and there's the discs for it and that sort of thing.
Yeah, for sure. It definitely was one of those sites that had a lot of information that nobody else did. So it is a shame, but it lives on in the Wayback Machine. So thanks to the Internet Archive. All right. I think our last item here is from the fine folks at 6502. Oh, what is their name?
Workshop.
Thank you. 6502 Workshop. Podcast or fail. Otherwise known as the team doing Nox Archaeist, which is the Ultima style RPG that they've been working on for a while now. And they recently had a graphics contest. We talked about that a couple months ago where you could submit your tile artwork. And so the winners for that are announced. And we'll link to that in the show notes where you can see all of the winners. And some really cool stuff came out of that. Really looking forward to this one.
Indeed.
So glad that there's 2 amazing RPGs in production for the Apple II. The Apple II's forte really was the RPGs, with the ample memory and fast disk access. RPGs were really well suited to the platform. So glad to see people playing to its strengths. All right, well, that was a lot of news, but we got through it. And I think we have one quick eBay item. Is that right, Mike?
Yeah, we do. And this is actually one from back in June that I told Evan that I would mention and then forgot to. So my apologies, Evan. I'm mentioning it now months after the fact and when it doesn't matter anymore. VCF back in June auctioned off a fully functional autographed Apple II, autographed by Woz. The thing sold after 49 bids for $4,056 US, and the money went to benefit VCF. So there you go.
Very cool. All right, well, I think we're going to forego most of our usual segments this month because we had so much news to catch up on, but we'll get back to feedback and other segments next month as we get back into our regular schedule once the KansasFest hangover wears off. And thank you, Mark, for taking the time to be on the show here with us.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
All right, well, until next month, thanks, everybody, and we'll see you in September.
Bye, everybody.
Using an Apple II is very easy. The only hard part is getting your kid away from it. You see, Apples are the leading computers in schools, so even though you bought it to help you work at home, your kid will want to use it for his own homework. Of course, if all else fails, there's one last thing you can try. Get him an Apple of his own.
This has been the Open Apple Podcast. Subscribe to us in iTunes or visit us at open-apple.net, where you can browse our extensive catalogue of past episodes or read our blog. If you like what you've heard today, or even if you didn't, your comments, questions or ideas are always welcome. Send them to feedback@open-apple.net.
Wow, that was a waste of 8 seconds.